Brought to you by Penguin.
Unto Us a Son is Given by Donna Leon, read by David Sibley. The good we wish for often proves our bane. I prayed for children, and I gained a son, and such a son as all men hailed me happy. But who'd be now a father in my stead? The blessing drew a scorpion's tail behind. Handel, Samson, Act 1, Scene 3. 1. You know I don't like to meddle in things, Count Falier told Brunetti. But since, in this case, he's so close to me, I feel I don't have a choice, not really. Brunetti, seated opposite his father-in-law, in one of the over-ripe armchairs that filled Palazzo Falier, had been listening to the older man for some time, aware of how difficult Il Conte was finding it to begin telling the story he obviously wanted Brunetti to hear. Il Conte had called him that morning and asked if Brunetti would have time to stop by and have a drink on his way home from work, because there was something he'd like to ask him about. Brunetti's first response, given that it was a warm day in early spring, had been to calculate the easiest way to walk from the Questura to the Palazzo without becoming entrapped in the by now normal migration paths of the herds of tourists. Because of the clear sky and benevolent temperature, walking up Riva delle Schiavone would be impossible, crossing Piazza San Marco an act of madness. The vaporetti coming from the Lido, however, were generally no more than jammed, not too crowded to board, so he'd accepted the invitation, tossing to the winds his usual reluctance to use public transportation when he could walk, and had taken the number 1 to Carezzonico and arrived early. I don't like gossip, Il Conte insisted, recalling Brunetti's attention. Never have. Then you're living in the wrong city, Brunetti replied mildly, smiling as he said it to remove the sting, and probably should avoid speaking to other Venetians. The Count's answering smile was broad and relaxed. The first is not true, as you know, he told Brunetti. Then, his smile even warmer now, he continued, The second might well be true, but if it is, there's nothing I can do about it. It's too late. I've known Venetians all my life. Is one of them the source of this gossip about Gonzalo? Brunetti asked, interested that his father-in-law would want to discuss gossip about his best friend, and curious to know more. Yes, and he's a lawyer. Perhaps thinking that Brunetti would ask him who, Il Conte held up a restraining hand and said, It doesn't matter who told me. It's the story that's important. Brunetti nodded in agreement. Like most Venetians, he was accustomed to swimming in the swirling froth of information and misinformation that flowed through so much of daily life. Unlike most Venetians, however, he took little pleasure in it. Long and tangled experience had shown him how unreliable most of it was. Brunetti, the police commissario, had heard tales so scabrous they reddened his cheeks, and Brunetti, the reader, was familiar with Suetonius' descriptions of the pleasures of Tiberius. Brunetti, the thinker, however, knew how prone Venetians were to exaggerate the deeds of those they'd never met, how careless of the consequences of what they blithely repeated, how fundamentally unreliable they were. He was certainly interested in what people did, but he seldom believed they'd actually done it until he'd accumulated sufficient evidence. Thus, whatever his father-in-law might have been told was to Brunetti a case to be proven, not a truth to be believed. While he waited for Il Conte to make up his mind about how to tell him, Brunetti's own thoughts turned to a decision the family had been avoiding and postponing for years. What to do with the family villa near Vittorio Veneto, which Il Conte and La Contessa no longer used.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?